Prakriti Foundation, I welcome everyone who's joining us online. Prakriti Foundation is an arts and culture NGO founded in 1998, and it has been a space where scholars, researchers, artists, critics, poets, and filmmakers have been able to present their work to those who engage with art on serious terms. One of its 4 annual festivals, Poetry with Prakriti, features eminent and emerging poets from India and abroad, presenting usually to small, intimate audiences at several venues across Madras: schools, colleges, cafes, galleries, boutiques, banks, parks, IT parks, and other commercial establishments. Due to travel and public gathering restrictions, Poetry with Prakriti is online this year, with readings on the first 3 Saturdays of every month. And may I say, not on behalf of Prakriti, bringing arguably the most beautiful of literary forms to the comfort of your homes and pajamas without the pressure of suddenly being asked to turn on your Zoom camera. We've had sessions already with Keki and Daruwala, Perumal Murugan, Priya Sarukai Chabria, and Danish Hussain. And today we have something particularly exciting in store. We are going to be joined by not only a poet whose work leaves the reader spellbound, Kartika Nair, but also an actor who sets the stage on fire every time she steps on it. At this point, I'd like to reassure Alliance Française de Madras, who have lent us the production space, that I do not mean this literally. Kartika Nair has written and co-authored several books of poetry, prose, and illustrated form. The performances she has scripted have been staged at venues across the world, including Théâtre de la Ville, Paris, Esplanade, Singapore, and Lincoln Center, New York. Also a dance enabler, Nair's closest and longest association has been with Sidi Labi Shirkawi and Damien Jallet as executive producer of several of their works and co-founder of Shirkawi's Antwerp-based company, Eastman. Nirupama Nityanandan is a theatre actor and dancer from Madras who has been living and working in Paris for the last 35 years. She was one of the earliest students of the Dhananjayans, learning and performing with them for 20 years. In 1987, she received one of the first theatre scholarships given by the French Ministry of Culture and joined the troupe of the Théâtre du Soleil in Paris as an intern. She was rapidly integrated into the company, directed by Ariane Mnouchkine, and has played several lead roles in their productions, including Iphigenia, Electra, and Lady Macbeth. She remains a senior member of the troupe. She received the Chevalier des Arts et Lettres nomination from the French government in 1995. When she is not performing, Nirupama teaches practical classes for high school students and runs workshops for professionals and amateurs. Nirupama is an enthusiastic reader of poetry and a keen admirer of Kartika's work. She is happy and honored to have this chance to perform them. The book in focus today is Until the Lions, Echoes from the Mahabharata, written by Kartika Nair and published by HarperCollins in India in 2015, Arc Publications in the UK in 2016, and Archipelago Books in the US in 2019. A reimagining of the Mahabharata in multiple voices, Until the Lions won the 2015 Tata Literature Live Award. Its UK edition was highly commended in the 2016 Forward Prizes. It has found its way into multiple extrapolations and adaptations, from a hybridized production at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland to Akram Khan's Dance Trio, winner of the 2016 Tanz Award for Outstanding Production, and a dramatized reading of its French translation by Françoise Giard at the Comédie Française, France's oldest active theatre, founded by Molière in 1680. We will take questions after the reading, and I ask that anyone who has questions type them into the Q&A box and not the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much. Now that I've teleported myself back to my house, I can welcome you again and ask you, and start off, I think, right, almost as the Mahabharata war starts off, the seeds of the war were sown in the Amba Shikhandi story. And that will be the first and very powerful poem we are about to hear. So Kartika, I'd like to hear from you about your fascination with the story, with this character or these characters, and what it was that sort of inspired you to write this poem.
Hi, Nandini and Nirupama, Peter, everyone at Prakriti. So this is rather special, having a performance combined with virtual event. Nandini, thanks for that question. It's funny because the book isn't completely written chronologically, but this poem was one of the very first voices I wrote. And it was, in a sense, the toughest, because it was a sort of presage to the immersiveness that entire 5.5 years involved. I think what intrigued and fascinated me about Amba is just the single-mindedness of that quest, which lasts 2 lifetimes, and how clear she is about what it will require and what she's willing to give, and how there are no compromises. At multiple points after the abduction, after she's returned and re-returned, as I say in the poem, she's offered several, consolation prizes or ways to reconstruct her life, but she's extremely clear on what she wants, and that's justice. Justice to the point that it becomes vengeance. And that's also something I was interested in, as to when the balance tips, the scales tip. As a poem, it was the one that took me longest to write, because I needed to find a way to inhabit both voices, both bodies, which kind of share this memory, which share a self, because the memory is what she's promised by Shiva across the 2 lifetimes. And for that, as I often say, poetry form came to my rescue. So the poem is called A Manual for Revenge and Remembrance. And the revenge aspects of it are entirely Shikhandi's in terms of the writing, whereas the remembrance is handed over to Amba. And this was something I conceptualized both visually and, verbally, using verb in the French context of what drives the action. So Amba speaks in a variety of forms, starting with a sonnet, going into blank verse. Then when she's completely overwhelmed by the memory of the abduction and the various injustices she faces, it slips into total free verse, or there's even an absence of punctuation. Whereas Shikhandi, all through the poem, embodies purpose, embodies single-mindedness, and hers is really a manual for war. So I made her occupy the space of a siharfi, which is sort of like an abecedere, which is a Punjabi and sometimes Sufi form, which in its original purpose is actually an invocation of the divine, except that Shikhandi has no divine. That vengeance is her purpose. So she kind of plows through the alphabet like phalanxes or battalions of war, and all her parts are driven by the verb, by action. Mira, could we just see what it looks like on paper? And there was this other thing, which is, color, which came to my rescue as well. So all of Shikhandi's excerpts are in black ink, whereas Amba's are in grayscale, so that there is a sense that this is the past that is speaking.
Right.
So the faded parts are really Amba's story, and then there is always this transition between the two, the begin to begin tercet.
Right. And when Niru performed this poem, of course, and which we are about to see shortly, there was an added dimension in that we had languages, we had play with languages. And Nirupama, when you spoke to me about the poem, you told me that you heard Shikhandi's lines in French and Amba's in English. And I think since you work across languages and across forms, I'm very interested in hearing from you about why that was the case, and why you heard maybe Shikhandi in French, and perhaps the role of language in shaping a character on stage.
Right. So one of the things about playing in 2 languages, this is the first time, actually, thanks to Kartika, that I'm performing one piece in both languages, sort of side by side. And it was very interesting to note how that changes things inside while one is performing the intention. What I can say is that for me, English seems to be concise, and I would say a vertical language which stays in the present. And for me, French is a language that is horizontal, that goes forward. And that's the sensation I got when I read Shikhandi, which is that there was this inexorable moving forward with the verbs and the so that's the initial sensation I got, and it was very evident for me to do the Shikhandi part in French. And the but then again, we are in a zone which is not always explicable. It was a sort of almost an empirical thing while I was doing it, or rehearsing it, something that I discovered.
Right, now with all that build-up, I'm sure the audience is very keen to hear the poem itself. So Harish, if you could play the first clip, Manual for Revenge and Remembrance.
Aère les vieilles blessures, apprête tes yeux de colle, de curcuma tes cicatrices. Ancre tête et jambes dans la haine ancienne et la fonte de la mémoire. Adhère des deux pieds à la terre, aligne zénith et moelle. Bénis à l'est la destinée, au sud la mort qui est douce, patiente, constante. Bande les nerfs de tes cuisses. Boucle tes deux paumes, brigue du serpent de mer son boyau pour corde. Bride les membres de l'arc, haut et bas, cabrés dans ce lien. Cambre-les en quart de lune, courbe vers toi son dos sylvain, contracte son ventre, cisèle tes flèches de comète tombées, tes épées de plaques d'éclairs, ta massue du cœur d'un volcan. Dessine en creux le nom de tes ennemis sur tige, pommeau, tête. Distille la fureur de l'océan, distille le dédain des ascètes, distille la ruse des dieux, déverse à longs traits dans ta gorge ce filtre brassé pour tes armes, expurge-toi de nom, sexe, lignage, et commence à commencer, commence à finir. For it is time. But it was always time. It's time I bayed at gods, at monarchs, time and time again. Through the months, the years, I prowled this planet, her plains, her jungles, her unmanned peaks, crossing every clime, drought and squall, and viler seasons, the burning rime they call disgrace. Unconcern, fall of lasting pain, bayed, first for word, your pledge, remorse, true or feigned, a salve for a scourge on your name, your breath, your crest, slimed, gangrened with senseless, heartless rite. It is time then. Time for gods and demons to concede one last boon. Time to reclaim your end, and time that I may rend this unloved, unending instant into brave men, unscathed by oaths, nights steeped in desire, maids immune to disrepute, the lives, lifetimes we lost, unspent. Expurge-toi de nom, sexe, lignage, efface parenté, honneur, miséricorde, de la main, de l'œil, de l'oriflamme, écroue cette litanie de blessures au cœur de l'os où elle érodera nerfs et moelle. Enflamme ventre, poumon de la déchirure des outrages, flambe en ce four, rage desséchée, douleur sourde, et forge la plus acérée des lances. Fais ton bras à ton arme, fonds sur le futur de chacun et fauche, un, puis deux, puis légion, fauche la lumière, fauche la vue, fauche l'histoire, gouge le soleil, griffe le ciel aux tripes, grève leur cœur d'épouvante, gorge leurs poumons de sang, garotte l'embryon de l'espoir, harpe en ton étreinte la planète tournoyante jusqu'à leur asphyxie, harcèle de carreaux, lance, javelot, poitrail et tempe distante, hache, membre, omoplate, clavicule à portée de l'âme, mais Harnache ton cœur de hier contre ces autres cœurs, voisins, maîtres, proches, et fais qu'ils les haïssent, afin qu'ils ne se hâtent vers eux, ces cœurs mourants, fragiles aux ailes d'éphémères. Incendie-les, alors recommence. Commence à vaincre. Commence à finir. Freedom. It was freedom you feared, was it not, my ancient virgin prince? Freedom, that siren song you could neither touch nor taste, to die, to want, to do, to disobey, and worse, much worse to your cursed eye, the freedom to love and wed. Father's last gift, high, lustrous as a star, to his girls, one you'd construe and curse as diabolic, depraved, a plot brewed to unman the Kuru clan. Revenge, your reply. Revenge, you roared, striking my land with all the rage of dying nebulae, with scourge-like speed and skill. Revenge, that reverse alchemy, transmute laughter and song to teeth ground in dust, calcine kingdoms, swage homes to rubble and rust, temper all overkill with tradition, tested spell to gild disaster. Who could stand a chance? Who? Not kin, not kinsman, not the siege of royal suitors from Kosala, Vanga, Kalinga, and more, nor the one who'd sworn to honor, love, and defend me through 7 lifetimes, through hell and heaven and afterlife, Shalva of Saubala, the man, no, king, for king was all he had learned to be, whose ardor your 3 arrows dethroned, quelled, and replaced with those twin deathless regents, pride and shame. Shalva, who would re-return me for the sin of being seized and stolen, yet unpossessed by Bhishma, brand me your arms. Shalva, sure once as daybreak, dearer than desire, once near as the blood within my bones. Shalva, now just a word, whose lineaments disperse as fumes into endless skies, whose troth and trust snapped louder, quicker than frail twigs in rain-starved plains. Love dies. So love dies, as does remembrance before hate. And some, like mine, with neither the splendor nor comfort of last rites, of bodies to memorize before burning. Who could stand a chance? A chance or an instant? An instant was all it seemed, the instant you had seized for erasure. Father, mother, aunts and servants, streets and city, Kashi, Madras ear ornament dropped to earth. And future, past, and present, you vanished them all. Father, mother, aunts, and servants, streets, you vanished all in an instant, diminished my world, my Lord, to so much less than lore or history, a nothingness no god or sage could inverse. The gods were nowhere seen nor heard. The resident ones played dead, and who could blame them? They had always hated losing battles. Heisted then 2 transfixed little sisters, their names scarce matter, both happy ciphers at most times, and I, your sole unmeant error, heisted. Heisted pedigrees and wombs, balm to contused Kuru pride, hand-grabbed brides for the crown prince, a real steal, your stepmother marveled, 3 for the price of 1, and Khatam, Kashi's stiff-assed might. Khatam, yes. Khatam, might and right, and some things more. Khatam. She spoke and knew her mind, that queen, the one voice in Hastinapur who did, demanding I be taken at once to where lay my heart when she heard its truth, back to Shalva. She spoke and knew her mind, that queen. enjoining after that night and day and night, first of capture, then return, rejection, re-return, enjoining son and stepson in turn to take my hand, attempt to expiate, to save, salvage, hope and honor, mine in shreds. Khatam, yes. Khatam, some things more she hadn't known. How swift they grow, sons, overgrow into kings and pedants. How queen mothers lose overnight their ruling prefix. How they need heeding no more. How anile oaths outweigh breathing women. But all this and what came after, verse and chapter, are as much yours as mine, as the pulse plunging down your throat those next 6 years. Unyielding, palsied years spent at palace doors, begging justice, your name a home, the wedding you wasted, spoused by Kshatriya law. 6 years, unyielding, palsied years, spent receiving a full kingdom's worth of ruth, but no redress. Then came the laughter, painful, public. Then came the jeers. Shame snapped, and there shame snapped thought and heart, my brittle heart, singing like aged firewood. And there, on a night dark with blood unspilled, I learnt what day had dared not tell. For our lives to recommence, you'd need be killed, that oath skewered, tongue speared into throat. For life to recommence, I'd need pluck breath from your belly, tear it to shreds, return those to your mother, your real river mother, her fellow gods. Unwrap your gullet, release that heart from its cage, swallow it whole, and own you. Own you, word and echo. Who could stand a chance, they did ask. Who? I, Amba. I stood and withstood, though chance there little was, stood with no wish, no word, no thought but one. On the tips of toes, entwined in root and shale, nibbled and licked by hungry winds, slivered by rain, stood through hoarfrost and sandstorm and landslide, stood still, so still vines wound around these thighs and lion cubs nuzzled beneath my shade, stood baying, beseeching, craving freedom from this faultless, futile woman's form, seeking another, minted, invincible self, a self that slays. Silent they stayed, all the gods, the hermits, dead or alive, still absent. Silent too were oceans, mountains, unnumbered planets, the ceaseless tide. Yet I stood longer, now drinking night, night after night, drinking each one, cloud-quilted, silken, lonesome, star-kissed, till night vanished, coursing through 4 limbs, spine, vein, and marrow, draining 8 worlds of slumber, dreams, desire, stood till day reigned alone to parch the earth, burn heaven and all its beings. Fire brought freedom. Fire was my haven, my arm. Fire drove the gods, errant overlords, to acquiesce, finally appear. Grant me the boon of redress, call it revenge, and respite. Freedom from the mire of my being. Rudra the archer, destroyer of sin, purveyor of peace, relieved my distress. Great warrior you will be, slayer of remorseless foes, reborn with full memory and your desire, the aegis of manhood. Now go, build your pyre, die. Rejoin the future. Fire, arm and haven once more. They thickened and dried my fingers and feet to brushwood. Matted hair formed tinder. These eyes melted to ply sacred oil, last unction. This self, the pyre I wore for long years, then blazed, blazed as only Death Stars should. Alors recommence, commence à vaincre, commence à finir. Incendie tous ces cœurs faiblissant aux ailes d'éphémères, ces crânes imbibés de sang, ces mains serrées jadis, ces pas où tu mettais les tiens, incise ces langues, encore irriguées de langage, inhume ces yeux qui ne se ferment plus, immole le reste. Invoque les dieux les plus cruels, les plus avides, idolâtres de l'invincible, joue des coudes à travers bataillons, héros, démons, pour atteindre l'ennemi, le fléau. Jette-toi à la gorge de qui se dresse en travers de ta route, prince fantassin, esclave, juge-toi au-dessus des questions périlleuses de moyens justes et de nobles fins, jugule les lois sacrées de la guerre, garde enchaînée ta conscience, et tue la parole libre, tue la compassion, tue la pensée, et entonne un chant funèbre, accuse l'ennemi, attise la foi aveugle et la fureur parmi les soldats. Lève ta haine en eux, lance peurs et rumeurs pour les affoler, mais ligote-les dans le fil du mot paix, de crainte que l'espoir ne se perde, qu'ils ne laissent derrière eux le royaume. Libère d'entre tes lèvres le nom de la mort, louée soit-elle qui se manifeste à ton côté, montrant un miroir à vos reflets, maculant l'un et l'autre, et à présent, marchez, marchez, main dans la main, vers la vengeance. For it is time, for it is I, the two stories you cannot flee. We are your death and destiny. For this time I shall battle you unfettered, free of my female frame, free as the primeval seas. For this time I traverse death and rebirth and beg manliness from a yaksha, nameless tree sprite, lord of the night. This time there'll be no debris of woman in me. My head grows sunwards, my knees and back hard, unbending. The voice unreels into bark. I scour softness, scrub grace from the skin till what glows is pure steel. Unfurl my womb and fly it, dripping rust as pennant, perhaps shroud. Then peel and burn the breasts. This time we meet. Neither shall win, for I will slay you. But first, you shall watch me die. Marche main dans la main avec la mort vers ta vengeance, ton enfant nourri à ton sein. Nomme, énumère les crimes de l'ennemi, neutralise la douleur, nuance ta rage, noue son regard à cet homme, à lui seul, oblitère tous les autres guerriers, archers, origes. Ordonne à ton armée d'outrepasser les ordres des aînés, conseillers, juges, arbitres, ostracise poètes et gens de paix, poursuis le dharma sans trop de hâte, persécute les plus chers au cœur de ton ennemi, presse-le de tourments, presse-le de se battre, prépare-toi. Vois la mort quadrillée, présent, futur, venu quérir, neveu, père, fils. Vois les femmes quêter, quémander leurs défunts, que la rage quitte ton cœur. Rappelle-toi l'avant-goût de ta victoire, ton irrévocable perte. Retrouve sa saveur, revis ta soif. Ressuscite les ans perdus, le désir lancinant. Relâche loin de toi ton serment et ta haine. Sonne timbales et conques. Salue l'ennemi. Serre ta lance. Sectionne œsophage, poumons, ligaments. Sens le crâne se fracasser. Saccage, force, justice, pensée en lambeaux sanglants, nerfs et os. Saborde ton âme et triomphe.
Wow, I have goose flesh like every time I hear this poem or read it, and especially to see Niru alternating so beautifully between the French and English. I think it sounded almost like an incantation towards the end. And I was just thinking that it's strange how both the great epics, both Ramayana and Mahabharata, sort of the seeds of the war are in female desire, sort of unfulfilled female desire. And Niru, I thought maybe I'd start by asking you for your reaction to the poem, like the first time you read it. There's so much anger, so much rage, and also there's so much frustration and hurt, and there were several emotions you had to marry along with two languages. So as an actor approaching a script, I'd like to hear what you thought of it.
Well, what was really important with this exercise is that since I had a limited amount of time to prepare it, and which was really excellent, actually. It's good not to have too much time. That on the one hand. And on the other hand, when I really discovered this text, it has the effect of all huge texts, which is that it has its own existence. And that's the sensation I got. So what was important for me was, first of all, Kartika can probably say more about this, but I think that the French translation is absolutely formidable. It's an extraordinary translation because, when there are repetitions, for instance, that where in the English there are different words that are used, but the repetition has been used in the French, which gives a different, you feel like, I felt like I was on a horse or on a, anyway. The main thing for me was to let the text have its space and live its life, first of all, because I think, like in any, huge text, because Kartika, I think you've written this really huge text, it needs its space, it reclaims its space, it commands its space, and you cannot have the actor creating too much interference, at least at this stage of the work that we are seeing right now. So I would say that my concentration was how to be in the right space while holding this beast, which is this text, this poem, in my hand, and how to be in the right space so that we could both breathe and give the words justice, because the words are really the skin and sinew of it. You need the words. Like I remember we spoke while I was working on this, and in one of the poems you'll see I added a word. I added one small word, and it was like an electric shock in my spine, because that word shouldn't have been there. And so when you're actually allowing the words to fly, they do the job. And I think that's what I was primarily trying to do, give the words space to do their job.
Kartika, I know that the French translation of the book, and particularly of this poem, is very, very dear to you. Would you like to speak a little bit about it, how it came about, and how you heard the words?
So Niru, thank you. That it's chilling just to listen to you and watch you be two beings. These two elemental forces. It's just extraordinary. I can't tell you just what it means. Nandini, Niru's right. I think the translation is extraordinary. I've been really blessed in that all the translations of the excerpts of the book have been phenomenal, whether the ones we hear later or one that we won't hear today in French by Laetitia Zecchini, and this particular one by Dominique Vitalios, who is a brilliant translator, and I'm just so blessed that she translated this. This translation was done for the reading at the Comédie Française, which Françoise Gillard had decided to do in 2016. And, it was staged in 2016, not staged, but the staged reading happened in 2016, but she'd chosen the poem already about 2 years back. So in that sense, it preceded the launch of the book. And again, it's very interesting why she chose this among the various voices. There's something universal about Amba's story and timeless, and it rejoins, the great heroines of various cosmogonies, whether it's Antigone or Electra, and I think Françoise found echoes of that as well. And one of the formidable things that Dominique has done is to maintain the kind of plowing through the alphabet. It's very linear in the choice of verbs. She's tried to maintain that same alphabetical order as in English through Shikhandi's voice, through all the segments of Shikhandi's voice.
And somehow the various forms that the book has taken, right from opera to dance theater to stage readings, the poem somehow seems to come, and even when the starting point is another poem, let's say, or another theme, everyone seems to come back to this poem. So if you could talk to us a little bit about the various forms the book has taken and why the Amba Shikhandi, the sort of dialectic becomes such a key part of any performative aspect of the book.
That's such a great question. You're right. It's sort of the HCF between the many adaptations and extrapolations there have been, whether it's school stage readings or Akram's trio, which is pure dance, or the opera, which the late, very great Eva Kleinitz had commissioned for the Opéra National du Rhin. Amba plays a significant part in all of them. One of them, I think, is what I just mentioned about the timelessness of the themes of, the loss of control of a woman, of her body, of her fate, and how so many things which are extremely independent of her own being actually determine her life. And it is the fight. Amba, even when she has absolutely no control over what's happening, is resolute, is implacable in regaining agency. That is basically her only quest. And I think that spoke to a lot of people in different cultural climates. Françoise didn't know the Mahabharata at all, but, she found Amba Shikhandi to be something that she felt compelled to read when she chose the characters, for instance. And with Eva's decision to commission an entire opera around Until the Lions, there's a slightly tangential twist to that. Eva loved Satyavati, who is another major figure in Until the Lions, because she said, Western opera has a lot of women as protagonists, but very often they come to dismal ends. And you rarely have someone who is completely in control, who is in many ways ruthless, but is also, reigns with a certain larger awareness and is not necessarily punished for it, which is a rarity. I mean, you have Dido coming to a nasty end, and you have all sorts of opera figures coming to very nasty ends. And Shobhana Jaisingh, who's the choreographer director on the opera, chose to, so Satyavati was kind of a given. She was part of our brief. Eva said it didn't matter which part of the book we took, she would really love to have Satyavati in it, which is easy because Satyavati is the vertebral column. And we left the choices of which chapters to Shobhana, and Shobhana chose Amba again, I think for many of the similar reasons. And though she was worried, I think, about how nihilistic Amba can be as well. Amba is not really a feminist. She's, bothered about herself and what she wants. So there's no thought of the larger world, which also makes her quite fascinating. With Akram, it was very personal because he had memories of the Mahabharata, Peter Brook's Mahabharata, in which he had played a role. And he had very fond memories of this. He was a child then, and he said, the actors, the lady actors had taken care of him, and he loved the way Corinne Jabert had performed her Amba. And this was in a way a tipping of the hat to Corinne and to Jean-Claude Carrier's conceptualization of that Amba, who is a fiery beast. And also there was something that Akram and I shared, which was great disappointment at the manner in which Shikhandi is made to obliterate her memory, so there is no resolution. There is, it's an odd ending to the entire Amba Shikhandi arc in the Brook Mahabharata. She's just, or rather now transformed into he, Shikhandi picks up the bow and arrow and forgets why he wants to kill Bhishma and refuses to do so, which is a sort of, countering of everything that 2 lifetimes have gone into. So we wanted to redress that.
Right. Now we move into the next poem, which is one of the Constancy poems. And I think I'd like to speak to you about the Constancy poems. There are 6 of them, if I'm not wrong. They are just, they're among my favorite poems. In fact, all the poems are among my favorites. But then I think the Constancy poems are also where you step out and we hear your voice as a sort of receiver of the Mahabharata and as the creator of Until the Lions. And I think the one that we are about to hear now, Spouses and Lovers, you look at these peripheral characters the Mahabharata and all its versions centers around certain characters, and those are the ones that, various creators of various performances and books and poems choose. But then I love the fact that you look at these peripheral characters, and there are various peripheral characters in Until the Lions. They have very strong voices, and obviously there's this magic when you hear them. It's almost as if you as the poet were not simply a creator, but an instrument through which these voices from long ago were making themselves heard. So I'd like, before we move to the Constancy poem itself, perhaps you could talk to us about when you thought of including the Constancy poems in the collection and how those voices came to you.
Nandini, you're right. They're sort of the most peripheral of the characters. Could you scroll, Mira? There are 6 of them, and they're among the anonymous voices because they're the survivors and they're also the victims in as much as they're going to lose their lovers, their spouses in the war. So it's both elegy and a kind of invocation of what is dear to each of them before the battle. So most of them begin with before the battle, or they end with before the battle. That chant is really central. It's the unifier, it's the connective tissue among those 6 poems. And the 6 poems go, they vary in length, they vary in form, but they all have this invocation of both what is cherished and what is about to be lost. And I think they are in many ways the embodiment of what my father told me when I was very young, that, war is never glorious. At best, it is a cruel necessity, but it is never glorious, and it is seldom. There are no noble victors, and I think I wanted the spouses and the lovers, the survivors, to reflect that the enormity of what is lost amidst all the triumphalism.
Thank you so much for that. Harish, could we move on to the poem, the Constancy poem, please?
Before a battle, grow inwards like root and rock, shed eyes, ears, shed words. Let us speak, your skin to mine. Touch alone scores memory. Touch alone will survive time.
Nirupama, I'd like to ask you about the next poem, the Jeremiah, which we will hear now shortly, which is Mohini's lament for Aravan, the warrior sacrificed in order to ensure that the Pandavas would win the war. So I think, again, I'm interested in your response to the poem. It's a Jeremiah, it's a very long poem. And there's so much. When I saw you do the reading on stage, there was just so much angst. It took so much out of you play the character of Mohini, and I think I'd like to hear a little bit from you about getting under the skin of this character, Mohini, who in some ways is, it's kind of Krishna turning his anger against himself. But then there's also an entire, just from the way Kartika has written the poem, there's such a separation between Mohini and Krishna, where Krishna's actions seem entirely divorced from the character herself.
Right. It's not particularly easy to talk about the process, like I said, but I'll try. Once again, the poem itself is so constructed that it has a sort of roadmap in it, which by reading it and rereading it, it sort of appeared. And it's the kind of mysterious roadmap, but there is one. Now, the way Kartika will probably explain also the way that the poem is structured, even visually, is very, very precise. So it was a kind of, I don't know how you say dédoublement in English, when you're split in two. So it's like Mohini talking to Krishna, who is herself, who is himself. And there is this huge grief and epic grief and a sort of epic fathomless anger, which is so it's so huge in its helplessness, because he is talking to him herself, and it's this sort of helpless rage that you feel throughout the poem. And once again, I think if you're actually performing it and you've rehearsed for 6 weeks and you're actually layering in a whole lot of stuff while you're performing a piece like this, then of course you can think of details and all that. But as I said, while doing this exercise of recording it for this webinar, I held on the text. The text gave me the end of a string, actually, like Ariane's thread through a labyrinth, and I followed that and trusted the text, and the text just takes you along. I mean, it's all you need to do is to open up the right doors, I would say, and windows, and you just follow it. So in fact, I didn't work it too much for the same reason that I evoked earlier, which is that I didn't want to overplay it, because I wanted the words to have their full to take flight, and I didn't want to put any weights on the wings. So basically, I would say that the thing that was most interesting for me was this roadmap that I was talking about. It's very, very clear. In this poem, for me, it was very, very clear.
Right. So you mentioned the word helplessness, and that's something that often comes back to me when I think of the Mahabharata itself. Though Krishna knows he's God and he knows a lot of things that he can see the future, but there's a sense of helplessness in averting disaster after disaster. But what I find interesting in this poem and in several of your poems in the book, Kartika, it's that Krishna is traditionally seen as a hero, the one who intervened during the disrobing of Draupadi, the one who recited the Bhagavad Gita and kind of spoke of karma and Arjuna's duty and things like that. But in this particular poem, we see an entirely different shade of Krishna as someone who's thoughtless, someone who's callous. And because it's him saying it, it's in a way it's a curse. In a way, it's castigating himself. So I'm interested in the character of Krishna in your head.
I think one of the things that was important to me in Until the Lions is the intersection of gazes, which implies multiplicity of gaze. So none of us are, one thing to everybody. We'll be heroes to one person, someone, absolutely villainous maybe, or just boring or unspeakable or anything in the spectrum to others. And when you're talking about epic, obviously the gaze changes depending on where on the battlefield you stand or on which side of the spectrum of what is traditionally considered, antagonist and protagonist you are. And so there is no one vision of Krishna in the book. But Mohini comes, as you know, just after the Krishna voice, where you see Krishna as, well, maybe shorn of the godliness, not the godliness, but maybe shorn of the goodliness, if I can put it that way, and very much God, but the master strategist, who has just, commanded Yudhishthira to sacrifice Aravan and enumerated the many reasons why that is important. And the Mohini poem comes just after, and it is the consequence. It is Krishna shorn of divinity, Krishna become human, Krishna become woman, Krishna become bereaved spouse, lover. So very much you mentioned helplessness, as helpless as one of the spouses, lovers of the Constancy poems, because of the sheer depth of grief and maybe the newness of that loss, which he experiences as, previously divine. So you're right, it's God's indictment of the world. And being God, there are no half measures. It is a sort of curse that is hurled to every element of the universe. And then it ends with his indictment of himself, or for the person he was just a few hours ago and the person he will become very soon. And I wanted to sort of shape it like an electrocardiogram. So it is visually shaped that way as well. Meera, could we just see very quickly what the poem looks like before we go into the video? Since Nirupama also mentioned that it was like a map for her. So it's architectured in a way to kind of indicate Krishna's state of being. And it's an ostinato, but visually I was very clear that I wanted it like a seismograph. So it's the fluctuations of the immediately grieving self, of the devastated, distraught self. And it's a self that Krishna hasn't necessarily occupied yet with all the invincibility that he has as an avatar elsewhere. Even if there is loss, there will be grief in various chapters of his life, but not quite in the same way. So, yeah. Thank you, Meera.
And Karthika, you mentioned earlier what your father said, about there being no glory in war, and he should know, having fought 3 wars, I think, for the country. I was just thinking, we've spoken about this, I think, almost since we met, about the violence in the Mahabharata as opposed to the Ramayana, where there's so much kindness, especially to little animals, from the squirrel to the birds, with which the Ramayana starts off, the killing of the separation of the birds, and to Jatayu. There's just so much compassion, whereas the Mahabharata is sort of all-out violence towards humans, towards animals. There's talk of sacrifice, there's talk of revenge, and it's just such a harsh book in certain ways. And I was thinking of how, this is something I'd like to bring Nirupama in for as well, how the Mahabharata, when we read it today, has so much resonance with what is happening around us in various parts of the world, where there's such a shift to the right. And also there's a certain selfishness. There are wars, and then there are withdrawals, and everything leaves behind a trail of hurt. So I'd like to hear from both of you about the relevance of the Mahabharata to today's time as we hear it today?
I really don't know. The subject is so vast. All I can say is that if we are talking about poetry, I really do think I'm pushing open an open door here is, well, poetry will save the world somewhere. And I would say that, doing something like this, the fact of doing theater, the fact of performing stuff like the Greeks or Shakespeare and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sort of inhabited by the cathartic effect of that, of performing, and I really think there's something in there that will save the world. It sounds corny, but there you go. And as Kartika said, the way that she has approached her version of the Mahabharata makes it totally available to everybody, and I think that's extraordinarily important. Voila.
Thank you, Niru. But no, Nandini, I think it's also in various ways true of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana as well, in terms of, topicality, though not quite in the same way, but in what we expect from our leaders, for instance, because there's the constant struggle between, being the ideal man and the ideal king, to take just one of the aspects. And of course, in the Mahabharata, it's there is no one protagonist, and that makes it so much more fascinating because you're just covering the entire gamut of grey, and real politic as well, and therefore, yes, it gets transposed to any nation, any era, which I think is in a larger way true of foundational epics, because they bring down existence to the essential pulses, the essential beats. Greed, ambition, love, envy, selflessness, sacrifice, desire, vengeance, injustice. You're essentially distilling the entire, lived experience into their highlights, if that makes sense.
Right, and with no further ado, we'll go to the next poem. I'd just like to say to the audience that, there is a Q&A box at the bottom, and it would be great if you could start writing in your questions, because once we come back, we will be taking audience questions. So Harish, if you could play the Jeremiah, please.
A curse, a curse, a curse on you. A curse on you, a curse on all of you. Gods, demons, sovereigns, oceans, planets, mountains, moon, fire, earth. On all of you gaping stars. A curse on creatures of the night, of day, on trees, on this air. A curse on all that rises, that gleams, that shades, that raises, that invades. A curse on all that remains, for he breathes no more. Aravan breathes no more hears, nor speaks, no more sings with the breeze, no more do his feet anchor the earth. No more do his cheeks kiss the sun's roving fingers. No more does he taste the sandal, the musk of these breasts. No more does he savor nectar in the hollow of a neck. No more will his skin warm my skin, shoulder to instep. No more will his hands map the journey of filaments from navel to pudendal cleft. No more can he rest his head between my legs, no more his mouth, no more his manhood, no more pulse, no more thought, no more Aravan. curse on you, for he is no more. Aravan is no more, no more. He is no more than 32 slivers of flesh for Kali's tongue, offering for Pandava victory, no more than gashes on a head, a chest, a belly, nose, temple, the point, the sacred point between eyebrows, twin sets ripped of earlobes, lips, knuckles, elbows, wrists, shoulders, knees, insteps, then 10 neatly sliced toes. Yes, 32 slivers of flesh that imbrue the earth with geysers of unending, unfading ritual red, while the rest will be fed to Agni's hungry craw, his blazing crimson craw, nape of neck and clavicle, ribcage, breastbone, gizzard, spine and sinew, gullet and tongue and teeth, his burnished gaze, his voice, the river ripple of his voice, his smile, his smile, his smile, the color of summer noon. A curse, a curse, a curse on you. A curse on night, on last night, heedless violet-skinned night that sped towards dawn, flashing toe rings and anklets, night that ended my heart, ended most of my life. A curse on Kali, a curse on all heaven, a curse on any god that clamors offerings, any god that trades in blood and breath for blessings, a curse on them, all of them, gods that revel in bloody mayhem, in sacrifice, 100 curses. A curse on Hastinapur, a curse on this feckless land, on all its kings, on the ancient house of Kuru with its parricidal kin. A curse on Bhishma for his dreadful vow, on Vyasa who kept Bharata's line alive. A curse on Dhritarashtra, on dead Pandu, on Gandhari and Kunti, and their many murderous, thoughtless good deeds. A curse. A curse, a bigger, a viler, a direr curse on those 5 Pandava brothers, bastards all. Yudhishthira, the pious eldest, who sends his children to die for a paltry throne. Powerful Bhim, who watched all this injustice reign and killed only his cousins. The same curse, dark and vile and dire, on Duryodhana, the cause of this war, on Dushasana, the next in line, evil disrober of women, and all 98 siblings, jealous, bitter blood to be spilled on Kurukshetra's sacred earth, sacred only to Brahmins or the living. Then Arjuna, oh, the bright, peerless Arjuna, precious to the gods, Arjuna, who fights behind Krishna's shield, Arjuna, who lets his son, his firstborn, Aravan, take his place at Kali's altar, bleating that he is helpless at every amoral turn. And a curse on you, Ulupi, mighty queen, grieving mother, a curse on you for not keeping him safe, for not keeping Aravan away. What use is free will if it fetters breath, if it smothers pulse? So why must mothers permit sons to follow noxious fathers? But what curse could be worse than aching womb, than empty heart? What curse of mine could ever be worse, Ulupi? A curse, a curse, a curse on us. On you, Krishna, Lord of 14 worlds, a curse, the vilest of all curses on you, for these gods, these demons, sovereigns, oceans, planets, mountains, moons, for this fire, this earth, this heaven, for all these gaping stars, a curse on you, the foulest of curses, Krishna, for spinning this loathsome universe into light, for this war that raises countless men and beasts, hope and goodness, a war that parches land and sea and sky, the war that you willed into being, a curse on your dharma that changes shape and color and size to suit the wearer, your mutant, bootless justice, and your lethal cosmic song, a curse on you for this deadly master plan to ensure Pandava victory, the ruse to spare your cherished Arjuna, a curse on you for contriving Aravan's death. And a million curses I hurl at you, Krishna, for transmuting into maiden, into Mohini, into me. A curse for proffering this choiceless coupling, this heady grief. A million curses for your power, O God that creates, God that destroys, God that forgets, as gods so easily do. A curse on me, for I live while Aravan lies unmoving, reduced to 32 slivers of flesh, to geysers of unfading ritual red. For while I breathe, he can no more dream, for I speak while his tongue is a mere blaze of flame, for while I walk, his legs are firewood on a pyre. While I taste air, he is just a name. While I dance, he is dead sacrifice. A curse on my breastcloth his fingers can no more undo. On my bracelets that will never mark his skin. On my eyes, for they behold Aravan no more, only carcass and bone. A curse on this gaze whose lust can stir him no more, on nails that will never graze his spine again, hands that will not wind around his neck, fingers that need never entangle his. A curse on my breasts, for they will blossom in his palms no more. On my lost laughter that will not caress his lips again. A curse on this womb that never will bear his seed and watch it grow. And one last vicious curse on my transient woman's soul that will forget Aravan after this morning when it becomes male once more. For Krishna will not spare me a morsel of memory, not the comfort of mourning, nor the covenant of a married name. A curse on me.
Kartika, you spoke earlier about how, the Constancy poems have to do with those left behind. And I think this in some ways is the pinnacle of grief of those left behind. And the fact that it comes from Mohini, or Krishna himself, it makes it so much more powerful. And I think on that note, perhaps we could move into the Constancy poem in French.
I think you mean the Padati poem, right? The last one.
Oh, I think do we have a reading of the Constancy again?
Yes, but that's not in French. The Padati is in French, and it's the soldier's voice. So maybe that's the one we can go into.
Yeah, we could go into that. Yeah, but before that, I think Niru is going to read it in English for us.
I hope she will.
Yes.
Would you, Niru, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
It's just the last third because we're running out of time, right? So, yeah.
To die forgotten is to die twice. Oblivion, the final demise. We won't survive. No meridians, no memorials, just distance and the dead. to sever, then swallow the horizon, gorge the sun. It won't be long now, Father, before daylight leaves my eyes. I hear night whisper, traveling northward from the chest, what she thinks a lullaby, traveling through spine, sinew, and nerve, into lung and tongue and skin. Sludge covers my eyes, Father, or is that the hue of a chagrined sky? Soon there'll be no variance between soil and skin. Both throng me like a shroud, though my flesh scalds and the soil stings with cold. Memory seeps through torn veins. I begin to unbelong from this self, from you, from the men who were mine, like kin I used to know, Father, used to know all my peers, their voices, their names. Shibi there, the eye of a javelin caught his, smote him, burst the iris, spurting dark gold on eager earth. I used to know his name too, the one fallen beside me, an arm crushed to unwilled clay, both legs further rolled, further away, dragged beneath his general's chariot wheels, a blear in claret, the arc of betrayal on hard ground, and him there, with an arrow twined through the rib cage next to the heart, as nearer than a lover's beat. Satya, Jaya, Jiva, the names collide, names and tones and functions. Padavit, Sarathi, Sainik, Rathi, remember them for me, Father. The dead all look the same. No tones, no pride, no traits, no whims, no gait to call our own, save this one where. For we cannot clamor till we are claimed. The names remain our soul archives, burn our spears, our lances, our shields, but swear you will chant the names of the faceless dead like a prayer, Father, and await the day when you no more need righteous warfare, nor heroes, no deadly belief, no divine stairs, no hereafter, no Kurukshetra either.
Thank you so much for that, Niru. Harish, if we could go into the poem in French, the same poem. On that note, Nirupama, thank you ever so much for being, honestly, several of our attendees have said this, you really brought the poems to life. And
thank you. And thanks to Kartika, I was just...
Mourir, oublier, c'est mourir deux fois. Oubli, ultime trépas. Nous ne survivrons pas, ni méridien, ni stèle, seule la distance et les morts pour trancher, puis avaler l'horizon, se rassasier de soleil. Ce ne sera pas long désormais, Père. Avant que l'aube ne quitte mes yeux, j'entends la nuit murmurer, voyager vers le nord depuis le torse, ce qu'elle croit être une berceuse qui traverse la colonne, tendons et nerfs, jusqu'aux poumons, langue et peau. La vase couvre mes yeux, Père. Ou n'est-ce que la teinte d'un ciel chagrin? Bientôt, il n'y aura plus d'écart entre sol et peau. Tous deux me pressent comme un suaire. Quoique ma peau brûle et que le sol gèle, le souvenir fuit mes veines. Je commence à me détacher de ce moi, de toi, des hommes qui ont été miens, comme des parents que je connaissais, père. Connaissez tous mes pères, leur voix, leur nom. Chibi, là, l'œil d'un javelot atteignit le sien, l'abattit, éclata l'iris, giclé d'or sombre sur la terre ardente. Je connaissais son nom et de celui qui est tombé à mon côté. Un bras écrasé, argile involontaire, les jambes plus loin, roulées plus loin, traînées sous les roues du chariot de son général, un flou vineux, l'arc de trahison sur la terre ferme. Et lui, là, flèche torbe dans le torse à côté du cœur, aussi près, plus près que les battements d'un amant. Satya, Jaya, Jiva, les noms se heurtent, nom, ton, fonction. Padavit, Sarati, Sainik, Rati, souviens-t'en pour moi, Père. Les morts se ressemblent tous, ni intonation, ni fierté, ni trait, ni lubie, ni allure qui leur soit propre, hormis cet unique état. On ne peut rien revendiquer tant qu'on n'est pas réclamé. Les noms restent nos seules archives. Brûle nos épieux, nos lances, nos boucliers et jure que tu psalmodieras les noms des morts anonymes comme une prière, Père, et attendra le jour où l'on n'aura plus besoin ni de guerre vertueuse, ni de héros, ni de foi mortelle, ni d'escalier divin, ni d'au-delà, ni de Kurukshetra.
Thank you, Niru. That's tremendous. I'm just really glad to be alive to hear that.
So thank you for organizing this. It's always such a pleasure to talk about Until the Lions. And Niru, you made the evening all the more special. So thank you ever so much for taking the time.
Hi, just on behalf of Prakriti, thank you, Nandini, for holding that event together today and for all the work that you put in. Thank you, Nirupama, for your readings, both the pre-recorded ones and the ones you did here. It, as so many people have been saying in the audience, it just adds another dimension to this entire evening, and it was very special. Thank you so much for that. And Karthika, thank you so very much for being here, for sharing your work with us, and for the book, which I am currently in the middle of reading. And I was just finishing a chapter which I heard today, and it was so much more special to just to hear that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for making the time to give us a part of your Saturday and stay with us through this evening. I've pasted in the information if you'd like to keep in touch with further Prakriti events. Do please join us. You're very, very welcome. We know that many of you are here for Karthika, and we're grateful for that. But we do have other events as well, and we hope that you will via Kartika, come and see some more of our other stuff as well. Thank you, of course, to Prakriti Foundation for this evening. And just to let you know that we do have 2 more for this Saturday, this month. Next Saturday, we have Parnab Mukherjee at the same time, Saturday at 7 p.m. India Standard Time. And the Saturday after that will be Monica Movie. Before we end the month, with the last Saturday of the month, we have the continuation of our ongoing retrospective of Manjula Padmanabhan's plays and performance pieces. And that's on the last Saturday. And then we get back to poetry again in the next month. So we do hope that you will all be with us through many of these events. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you especially to Nandini, Nirupama, and Kartika.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nandini, as always.
Thank you.